If you're visiting with us, that was my wife. And not all the ladies would say that to me just because I'm the pastor, so I don't think. Hey, some of you know, in around 97, the VH1 channel started a series called Behind the Music. And each episode, for those of you that have watched it or haven't, each episode focuses on a particular musician or a band. And the idea is that for somewhere between 60 and 90 minutes, you kind of get a behind-the-scenes look at their life. And sometimes, and I think this is really cool when this happens, you get to see what it is in their life that inspired a particular song. And they have done stories on just a whole range of different musicians and bands. Green Day, 50 Cent, Willie Nelson, let me talk about variety, Sting, Britney Spears, the Dixie Chicks, Bob Marley, Queen Latifah. And so the musical genres for this are all over the map. But for me, when I hear the backstory for a song that's a famous song that everybody knows, to me, it just adds so much depth to it. And I find that this is especially true of worship music. Because there's a ton of songs that we sing in churches, and really for me, at least, for the vast majority of them, I don't have any idea what it was in the songwriter's life that inspired the lyrics. But every once in a while, the backstory becomes known to a particular song. For instance, many of you are very familiar with the classic hymn, It Is Well. And for those of you that don't know, but when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. And there's a story that people have been singing now for over 130 years. And the backstory to that is actually kind of crazy. Some of you know this because it's become fairly famous. But it was written by a guy named Horatio Spafford. And he was a very successful attorney in Chicago and also a very active follower of Jesus and very active in all kinds of ministries during his day. He had 5 children. And when his son was 4 years old, he died very tragically of scarlet fever. Shortly after that, the Chicago fire ravaged Chicago, and he lost most of his wealth. So he was a very wealthy guy with this beautiful house, beautiful wife, beautiful children. And his son was gone, and his business was devastated. And so they were trying to overcome just the grief of all of this, he and his family, and he decided he had enough money left to take a European vacation with his wife and his 4 daughters. So they were getting ready to leave for this vacation, and something happened with his business, and he wasn't able to go, at least not on time. So he sent his wife and his 4 daughters ahead of him to Europe to start getting some rest and try to get life feeling back to normal. On the way to Europe across the Atlantic Ocean, the ship accidentally, somehow must have been foggy or something, collided with another ship and it sank. And so he got the news that the ship had sank. He didn't know, there were some survivors, but he didn't know. He got a telegram from his wife in Europe, and all she could afford really was 2 words: saved alone. And it turned out that all 4 of his daughters were drowned in the wreck. So as quickly as he could, he boarded passage to go and meet his wife in Europe. And while his ship was crossing the Atlantic at approximately the same area where his daughters were killed, he wrote that song. And I'll read it again because I just think it's staggering when you know the story. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll. And I imagine him really standing on the bow of that ship, watching the waves and processing all of this with all of these questions for God. He says, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. For the next 3 weeks, we're gonna look at 3 different psalms. And we tend to think of psalms as ancient poetry, and they are, but originally, and I don't think we often think of them this way, but originally the Psalms were songs. Okay, they were worship songs. And each psalm was written out of somebody's real life experiences, okay, the highs and the lows of life. At least 75 of the Psalms were written by David, okay, the second king of Israel. And David was a king and he was a warrior, but he was also, we're told, a poet and an unbelievable musician. And David lived this incredible life with God. He went back and forth between the highest highs and the lowest lows. And out of that experience, David wrote some of the most powerful lyrics, and probably the most well-known is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And this wasn't originally a poem. It was a song, and it had a tune. Now, we have no idea what the tune for this song was, and I think this is just kind of interesting. In a few of the Psalms, they begin with this little introduction, and they tell us what the tune was. Okay, for instance, Psalm 22 starts with this description. It says, "For the director of music, to the tune of the doe of the morning, a psalm of David." Now, everybody here knows the doe of the morning, right? I mean, raise your hand if you can stand up right now and sing for us, Doe of the Morning. Dennis, can you stand up? Yeah. Like, we have no idea. You know, these are 3,000 years old. We don't know what Doe of the Morning sounded like, but apparently back then, okay, when they were writing these descriptions, everybody did. And so you just take the lyrics of Psalm 22 and you put them to the tune of Doe of the Morning, and you've got this worship song. And in just a few cases, with just a few of the Psalms, we're told even more. We're told what was happening, what was going on, the backstory when the song was written. For instance, Psalm 52 starts with this. It says, "For the director of music, a maskil of David, when Doeg the Edomite had gone to Saul and told him, David has gone to the house of Ahimelech." Now, all of you remember the story when Doeg the Edomite did that, right? You know, probably not. But it's okay. And here's the cool thing, because that story is actually in the Bible. You can go to 1 Samuel and you can read all about that. And so with a handful of Psalms, we're given this background. And over the next couple of weeks, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a few of those. We're going to take one of David's Psalms each week, and what we're going to do is we're going to travel together behind the music. Now, the Psalms they're like incredibly rich and beautiful on their own, but I really believe that when we know the background behind them, they become so much richer, so much more powerful, so much more real. And so I'm excited about this. This is going to be cool. And this morning, we're gonna kick this whole thing off with Psalm 142. So here we go, Psalm 142. It says, "A maskil of David when he was in the cave, a prayer. I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. I pour out before him my complaint. Before him I tell my trouble. When my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watch over my way. In the path where I walk, people have hidden a snare for me. Look and see, there is no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life. I cry to you, Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Listen to my cry, for I am in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me, for they are too strong for me. Set me free from my prison, that I may praise your name. Then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me." Now, in the very beginning, it says this, "A maskil of David when he was in the cave," a prayer. And so David wrote these lyrics from a cave. These words came flowing right out of his experience. And this morning, what we're going to do together is we're going to delve into that experience. And I think it makes sense for us to try to figure out how in the world David ended up in a cave in the first place. And so let me give you like a summary of David's life on hyperspeed that'll take us from the beginning of his life to where he is in the cave. I'm going to try and do this in about 5 minutes. So fasten your seatbelt. Here we go. Now, some of you, this will be kind of review, and that's totally fine, but here's the deal. Okay, one day, David's just a kid, and he's out tending the sheep. And the prophet Samuel rolls into town to anoint the next king of Israel. Now, Israel was at the very beginning stages of being a nation. At that time, they were ruled by their very first king, King Saul. Good. Okay. A few of you have read the Bible. God had chosen Saul, and Samuel had anointed him. Okay, this was God's man. It was God's choice. And Saul started off as like this great king, and he was doing incredible things, and then it took a turn. And he started to become selfish and faithless, and he stopped trusting God and seeking God, and he started doing horrendous stuff. So God says, that's it. Tell Samuel to go and anoint the next king. And the next king turns out to be David. He comes in from tending the sheep. He's just a boy. And there's Samuel and David's whole family waiting there. And David gets anointed. And it's kind of like this hush-hush thing. But David now knows that he's in line to be the next king of Israel. Now, nothing happens for a long time. He just goes back to tending sheep, and Saul is still the king. And then one day, Saul starts really taking a downturn, and he goes through these horrendous bouts of depression. And it turns out he's going crazy. He's having delusions. And the only thing that helps is music. And apparently, David is like a world-class musician. He's like the Jimi Hendrix of the harp. And so some guys hear about David from the palace, and they go and they get him and they bring him back, and he becomes Saul's personal musician. And so whenever Saul starts to wrestle with anxiety or depression or hallucinations or whatever it is, David is brought into play, and David plays the harp or whatever instrument he had, and it calms Saul down. And so he just loves David, just adores David. But through all of this, David's still a boy. He's not old enough to go to war. And one day, Israel is at war with their arch enemies. Anybody know who that is? The Philistines. Yeah, that's a great story. And David is sent by his father to bring supplies to his brothers, okay? His brothers are camped with Saul and with all of the Israelite army. And they're in kind of this standoff with the Philistines. And the Philistine army keeps sending out their champion, okay, Goliath. And this is such a famous story. And the deal is that if any Israelite can take Goliath, then the Philistines agree to surrender to Israel. But if Goliath wins, then Israel has to surrender to the Philistines. Okay, so this is like betting the fate of a nation on a UFC fight. So David gets to the scene, and he's just like, right on. Like, this is awesome. All we have to do is beat that guy. So he's like, cool. Like, who's going to take him? And David's brothers are like, have you seen the guy? He's like 9 feet tall. He's huge. And so they're looking around, they're going, not me, not me, not me. And that's the reaction of pretty much every Israelite soldier. Even Saul is kind of hiding in his tent, just cowering away. So every day, Goliath and the Philistines come out of their camp, and they trash talk Israel, and they trash talk Israel's God. And the soldiers and David's brothers, they're like kind of bothered by it, but not really. But David, like, he hears this and he can't stand it. He can't believe that no one is doing anything. He's like, are all you guys just going to sit here and take it while he trash talks God? So David goes to Saul and he says, look, I can take him. Send me. And Saul's like, what? You're just a kid. And David's like, yeah, but like, I have God with me. Okay, so I know this guy's big, but he's like no match for God. So let me take him. And so Saul sends him out. And this is the classic scene. We'll read this directly from the Bible. This is 1 Samuel chapter 17, 41 to 47. It says, "Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David." Now, you got to imagine this scene. I mean, if you can imagine the biggest man in the world, okay, we're thinking like Shaq, and you got like Cameron going out up against him, meandering out there, you know. It's a mismatch. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." That's some good trash talk. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or by spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." And he's marching out to face this guy, and you look and you go, the faith is just staggering, the love for God, just mind-blowing. So he goes out, and as you know, he takes down Goliath, and in an instant, David becomes a national hero. And so Saul is overjoyed, and he elevates him to a high rank in the military. And David becomes a legendary warrior. And so he keeps leading the military out and fighting, and they keep winning, and they keep fighting, and they keep winning. And pretty soon, his popularity eclipses that of Saul. And that's when things go sideways. Like, I don't know if you've ever worked for a jealous, raving lunatic. Like somebody in your office that is deeply threatened by your competence. But here's what happens to David. This is chapter 18 now. We're picking this up in verse 5. "Whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing." Okay, that's awesome. "With joyful songs and with timbrels and lyres." Not bad. "But as they danced, they sang, 'Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands.' Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. 'They have credited David with tens of thousands,' he thought, 'but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom?' And from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. The next day, an evil spirit came forcefully on Saul. He was prophesying in his house while David was playing the lyre, as he usually did. So he's like this military guy that goes off and leads the armies, and then he comes back and plays the lyre for Saul. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled it, saying to himself, 'I'll pin David to the wall,' but David eluded him twice." Now, like I said, I'm guessing some of you've had some tensions with your boss. But you know you need a new job when he starts hurling spears at you. And yet David, he holds this deep respect for Saul, like this reverence for him. And the bottom line for David is that God chose Saul. He is God's guy. And so David is going to serve him with all that he is, no matter what. Now, Saul's son Jonathan is David's best friend. And Jonathan talks Saul out of trying to kill David. And in fact, David eventually marries Saul's daughter. This just gets weirder and weirder. A girl named Michal. And Michal is beautiful, and David loves her. But as time goes on, David continues to have more and more and more military success, and the nation is loving him more and more, and it is driving Saul crazy, like literally. So Saul tries the spear thing again, and he misses again, and then he just goes, you know what, and he orders a hit on David. So David has to flee, okay? Now, here's what happens. We're picking this up in chapter 21, verse 10. That day, David fled from Saul and went to Achish, king of Gath. Now, the king of Gath is, what people group is this? Anybody? It's the Philistines. Okay. David is fleeing to the Philistines. That's how bad it is. But the servants of Achish said to him, "Isn't this David, the king of the land? Isn't he the one they sing about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands, but David his tens of thousands?" David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of Achish, king of Gath. Well, yeah. So he pretended to be insane in their presence. And while he was in their hands, he acted like a madman, making marks on the doors of the gate and letting saliva run down his beard. Achish said to his servants, "Look at the man. He is insane. Why bring him to me? Am I so short of madmen that you have to bring this fellow here to carry on like this in front of me? Must this man come into my house?" David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. So David gets out of Gath and he runs to the only place he can find, and he takes refuge in this cave. Now, you think about that. This is a man who's been promised a palace. He's expecting a palace. He's waiting for the day that he would take the throne. He had, and it was all happening. He had wealth and power and fame and friends and security and what appeared to be this guaranteed future. And of course, I mean, on top of all that, this isn't really even his idea. He's just a shepherd kid. He's not expecting this because he's some rich brat that's entitled. Like, this was all God's idea. And here it is, it's all falling apart. He loses his position, he loses his friends, he loses his country. He loses his prestige and his status. He even loses his wife. He loved this woman, but when David fled, Saul gave her to another man in marriage. Now this morning, I want to talk to you a little bit about life in the cave. And the cave is that place that you never wanted or intended to be. Like, you had some dreams, some plans, but something has gone really sideways. And some of you, you might be here this morning and you're in the cave right now. And maybe you've worked really hard. You've worked really hard, but you've lost your job anyway. Maybe you envisioned a great career, but something has gone horribly wrong. And you find yourself in a place that you never thought you'd be. Or maybe for some of you, your dreams of family life have been shattered. Maybe you always wanted to be married, but for some reason it just hasn't happened. Or you want the family, but you find yourself in this cave of singlehood. Or maybe you stood at the altar long ago with so much anticipation, and things just have not gone according to plan. Okay, your life, your family, none of it is the way you expected. It's been harder, more complicated, more painful. Like, I don't know what your cave might be, if that's where you find yourself. But it's when you find yourself in a place that you never intended to be, you never wanted to be. You dreamed of something great and it hasn't happened. And life is very different from what you imagined. Now you think about the dream for David. He's promised a throne. He's promised a kingdom. And everything seemed to be heading in that direction, and then it all came crashing down. He flees from Saul. He flees from the Philistines. He flees until there's absolutely nowhere else to run. Like, from life in the palace as the exalted one to now life in the cave. And it's from the cave that he writes Psalm 142. He's completely at the end of himself. And there he decides to write a worship song. And so I want to read the lyrics to this one more time now. Psalm 142. I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. I pour out before him my complaint. Before him, I tell my trouble. When my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watch over my way. In the path where I walk, people have hidden a snare for me. Look and see, there is no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life. I cry to you, Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Listen to my cry, for I am in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me, for they are too strong for me. Set me free from my prison, that I may praise your name. Then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me. These words are written amidst the most unthinkable disappointment. And this is what makes it so extraordinary to me, because David's response to this situation in this moment is so raw. And I'm struck by the boldness of verses 1 and 2. Because here's what I've found when I've logged time in the cave, I wonder why it is that I'm there. And I wonder where God is. And sometimes I wonder if maybe my pain in this whole disaster is just God's punishment. And I start to look at the areas of my life where I'm falling short, which, guys, at any given time are vast. And whatever I happen to feel most guilty then rises up to the surface, and I start to think to myself, maybe God is punishing me because of this. See, the temptation is to see God as the reason for my pain, my enemy. And then to want nothing to do with God, to want to hide or isolate, not go to church, not pray, not read the Bible, have nothing to do with God. But David doesn't do this at all. I mean, look at verses 1 and 2 again. I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. I pour out before him my complaint. Before him I tell my trouble. Do you know what God wants from you and for you when you're in the cave? He wants you to share your heart with him. Are you frustrated with your life? Then talk to him. Are you confused about where you are and how in the world you got there? Then talk to him about it. Are you scared that things might not ever change? Talk to him about that. What is it that's actually going on inside of me, inside of you? Are you angry with God? Do you feel like you're just getting a raw deal? Like there's a lot of people out there who do way worse things than you, and they seem to be being blessed. How can that be? I don't know what you could be feeling, but whatever it is, what God is saying is talk to him about it. Come to him with it. And if you're going through something right now, I just want to ask you, where is God in this? Where is he? Is he central to this? And even if you're angry with him, even if you're frustrated with him, talk to him about he can take it. He really can. So David comes and he just pours out his complaint, and guess what? God is delighted. Because he'd rather have the real you with all of your anger and all of your confusion than to have you just walking around pretending to be okay. Putting on a smile and pretending like everything's fine. It isn't real, and he knows that. Ultimately, what he wants is you. He wants you. He wants access to your heart, to the real stuff. And you see David do that. Now, something else I notice here is David's just desperation. You can feel it in the tone of the words. He's sitting in the cave and he's reflecting, and he feels abandoned and alone. He's tried to go make friends among the Philistines. He's abandoned, he's alone, and one of the things that happens in the cave is that our delusion of self-sufficiency gets blown up when life goes sideways. We start to realize, I'm not in control. I can't make everything in my life happen the way I want. And we become painfully aware of our limitations. We become aware of our actual need for God. And so listen to verses 3 to 7. When my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watch over my way. In the path where I walk, people have hidden a snare for me. Look and see, there was no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life. I cry to you, Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Listen to my cry, for I am in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me, for they are too strong for me. Set me free from my prison, that I may praise your name. Then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me. And David cries out to God, and he asks him to free him from this prison. But that means that David is going to have to resist a certain temptation. And we're going to jump ahead to 1 Samuel chapter 24, and we're going to see something. There's a deep connection between temptation and the cave. Because when we're in the cave, when we're in a dark period of life, someplace we never wanted to be, man, we are so vulnerable. We're vulnerable to anything that promises to give us a way out of the cave. Like, we'll do almost anything for a few moments of relief. Now, here's the situation for David. He decides to make the cave his home because he's got no other choices. And after a while, word gets out. David's still pretty famous, and people like him. And word gets out that David is in this cave. And pretty soon, some other runaways, they take off and they join him. And these are guys that are outlaws or whatever. And they're Israelites too, but they're all on the run. Now, David is loyal to Israel, and he never really stops being a warrior. So he takes this little band of misfits, and whenever the Philistines start to enter into Israelite territory, he runs out there with his guys and he attacks them. Like, he loves Israel. He wants to see Israel defended. So even with these outlaws, even in this situation, he's protecting Israel. And this is life. Hiding in the cave, hanging out with a bunch of outlaws, running out, attacking the Philistines, and then going back and hiding in the cave. One day, an opportunity that David never saw coming comes along. It's an opportunity to change everything. And here's what happens. This is chapter 24, 1 Samuel chapter 24. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, David is in the desert of En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 able young men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. I just love the sound of that, so I'm going to say it again. The crags of the wild goats. 3,000 men. It's kind of overkill for David and just a band of misfits. So he came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. The men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish." Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." With these words, David sharply rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul, and Saul left the cave and went on his way. Then David went out of the cave and called to Saul, "My lord, the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He said to Saul, "Why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lay my hand on my Lord, because he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. See that there is nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you were hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Who are you pursuing? A dead dog, a flea? May the Lord be our judge and decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand." When David finished saying this, Saul asked, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" And he wept aloud. "You are more righteous than I," he said. "You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You have just now told me about the good you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not kill me. When a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed? May the Lord reward you well for the way you have treated me today. I know that you will surely be king and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not kill off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family." So David gave this oath to Saul. Then Saul returned home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. So David, in this moment, proves his devotion to Saul, and Saul's blown away. And in this moment, it looks as though his love for David has just come flooding back. He calls him my son, and he breaks down. And just imagine the scene. He breaks down weeping. And then the two of them kind of share this incredible moment. Unfortunately, Saul is still crazy. He's still unstable, which means David can't just return to the palace. And so you have to imagine for a second that moment in the cave. Imagine the inner turmoil of David. Here's a way out of this life. Here's a way out of the cave. Saul is completely defenseless, and his men start whispering to him, "David, this is the day the Lord spoke of." In other words, David, this is it. God promised you deliverance. Now here it is. Saul's right here. You can take him out right now. David, this must be what God wants. God doesn't want you to be unhappy and miserable in this cave. Here's the way out. This must be God's will. And you have to imagine that must have been awfully tempting. Must have been almost overwhelming for David to think, I could get out of this cave right now. But it would have been wrong. It would have been a shortcut that I think would have destroyed David. And it would have sent a message to everybody in Israel that the way to become king is to kill the old one. And I think it would have absolutely destroyed David. And I just want to say something serious right now. Because some of you may have come in here this morning and you're in a cave. You're in a place in your life that you never wanted to be. And there is a shortcut to relief that's tempting you. Maybe you've been single for a long time and you just feel so lonely. Maybe your marriage is in a really difficult or dark spot. And there's another relationship that promises intimacy. And it's so tempting for you to look and to think, this is so available and this would feel so good. And I'm so miserable and I'm so lonely in this cave. And I know that God wants me to be happy. And you can rationalize it. But it's a shortcut. It's not what God wants for you. It contradicts his desire for you, and you know it. Ultimately, you know it. And really, the question that your future pivots on right now is, will you take the shortcut, or will you trust God? Will you say, God, I will trust you, even if it means I have to spend some undetermined amount of time more in the cave? I mean, maybe you're facing a financial temptation. Or maybe it's a temptation to deceive somebody in some way or to cheat on something. Maybe it's a temptation to keep some wrong hidden. Maybe it's a temptation to just quit something when you know that God is calling you to endure. But you think and you go, oh, it just feels so good to walk away from this. I mean, maybe God brought you here today to wrestle with this question. Will you have the courage to not take the shortcut? Because friends, the hard truth is this: taking the shortcut can destroy your soul. And the reality is nothing is worth your soul. Nothing. And that leads me to one final thought. The source of our ultimate hope. David closes this psalm with these words, okay, verses 5-7. He says, I cry to you, Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Listen to my cry, for I am in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me. for they're too strong for me. Set me free from my prison that I may praise your name. He says, then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me. And he envisions this incredible picture here at the end. Then the righteous, okay, those that know you, God, those that walk with you, will gather around me because of your goodness to me. Not because I murdered the king, not because I powered up. They will gather around me because of your goodness to me. He's trusting that God somehow, even in the midst of all of this mess and confusion, is going to bring about what he promised. He's trusting that God will eventually lead David to the throne. But when he gets there, it's not going to be through murder. It's going to be something that God does, and God will get the glory. And everyone will know that David has been blessed. And other people, David says, that love God will come alongside. And together, he with them will lead Israel beautifully in ways that honor God. And in the midst of this dark cave, you see David just clinging to hope. He's holding out for hope, trusting God to fulfill his promises. And it turns out, if you know the story of David, that's exactly what God does. It takes a long time. But eventually Saul dies, completely independently of David. And David takes over as king, and he does amazing things for Israel. And in the end, God delivers. He's faithful, like he always is. But the question that faces us in the cave is simply this: will I trust him? God did take David to the throne, but it didn't go like David planned. And the simple truth is, God is leading you, and he's leading me to good places. He always is. But that journey very often will take us through a long time in a cave. It could be years. I don't know how long it will be. God understands all about caves because he's been there. Sometimes when you're in the cave, you look around, you go, there's just nowhere else to turn. And all you can do is find refuge in God and cling to an incredible truth that God understands all about caves because he's been there. You think about the road of Jesus. The road of Jesus also came through a cave. The Son of David had everything stripped away. The Son of David, Jesus was called. He had everything stripped away. He lost his position as a teacher. He lost his safety. He lost his friends in his darkest time. He lost the adoration of the crowds. And his enemies seemed to have the last word. They watched him suffer and die on a cross. But then, you know what happened? They put his body in a cave. They thought he was finished. But what they didn't know, what the evil one seems to always forget, is that for those who trust God, the cave is never the end. So they put him in a cave for a while, but it was only for 3 days. They couldn't keep him there. Now, I don't know about your cave. I don't know how dark it might be. I don't know how scary it might be. I don't know how lonely you might feel in it. What I do know is that your story doesn't end there. God is working on your behalf all the time. Now, I don't know if it's going to be in this life or the next, but God is going to do something beautiful. Now, I'm not in any way saying, don't hear me wrong, I'm not in any way saying that eventually you're going to get everything it is that you now want. But what I can guarantee is that because of the Son of David, there is a kingdom that awaits every single one of us. God may bless your socks off in this life. I hope he does. But no matter how dark your cave or how long it lasts, there is a kingdom that awaits. It's real and it's yours. And Jesus promises it'll make your time in the cave seem like nothing. And that's our ultimate hope. And this is what the faithful of God have clung to for thousands and thousands of years. Whether it was David or Daniel or Mary Magdalene. And it's the hope that inspired words like these. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well. It is well with my soul. Guys, that's a cave song. It's a song of hope. God's not finished with us. The story isn't over.